I'm going to show you the loop cast on method for the Wesley Bob ornaments that I designed a few years ago. Now we're also using this cast on for one of the options, one of the toe options in the mystery knit along socks that myself and my designer friend Sarah Alderson have designed. This is the cast on method for one of the options for the toe in that sock. It's a great technique for starting a circular knit in which you're starting from the middle, the centre of the circle, so where you're starting with the least number of stitches that there are in the knitting. For the sock, the toe in question starts with 8 stitches. With this method it's necessary to cast on 9 stitches because this method only works with an odd number of stitches, and then at the end of the first round the 9th stitch is dropped, and it might become obvious as I do the tutorial why that is. So the first way is we've got the tail and then the yarns leading to the ball, and we're going to make a loop so that the yarn leading to the ball crosses over the tail yarn, as you can see it does there. And then I'm going to hold that loop while I insert my knitting needle through it from the front to the back of the loop, so that way. And then I'm going to wrap the yarn as to make a stitch and make my first stitch, and then I just do a simple yarn over. So we're entering the needle through the yarn when we make an ordinary stitch. It goes through the loop, wrap the yarn around the needle to make the stitch, and then bring it back through the loop, and then the yarn over, we don't go through the loop again, we just bring the yarn around the needle. So every other stitch you go through the loop and wrap the yarn and pull it back through the loop to make a stitch, and then do a yarn over, and just carry on alternating those two things, a knit stitch by going through the loop and back through it with yarn, and a yarn over. So far, how many have we got? 2, 4, 6, 7, so we need 2 more. So a yarn over. The thing is, we can't finish with a yarn over, we've got to finish with a going back through the loop so that it's secured. The stitch that's on the needle is secured by the loop, so you can't finish with a yarn over. And there we have 9 stitches, and now I'm going to set those stitches up for magic loop knitting. So I'm going to take half of them, well in fact 4 of them, onto the needle at the other end of this circular needle, so that the first stitch that I knit in the round will be in fact the first stitch that I cast on with this method. So I need to bring the cable of the circular needle out between the 4th and the 5th stitch on that loop, and put those 4 stitches there onto the needle, bring them to the point of it, and then I'm going to pick up the other needle ready to knit that. So my tail yarn, my ball yarn, is coming from there. You see that's the working yarn is coming from the final needle that's on the cable of the circular needle, and I'm going to use it to knit the first stitch, which is here. There, can we see? Now can you see that the stitch is very loose? Don't worry about that, leave it loose. Don't try and tighten that stitch, because that stitch will naturally tighten itself when you tighten up the cast on the circle. Bring the yarn through it to tighten it. Right, so without pulling yarn from that stitch through to the next stitch, we're going to knit the next stitch and carry on until I've knitted those 4 stitches. Now sometimes you'll be doing increases between these stitches, and I know in the toe for the sock there are indeed increases between these stitches. I'm just demonstrating here. Can you see what happens if I tighten the tail yarn? We'll look more at that at the end. For now we're just going to set up for the other half of the round. So I'm turning my knitting around, because I'm doing magic loop method. Now I sometimes have difficulty here, so please be patient with me if I do. No, I'm not having great difficulty in getting those stitches. Oh yes, those 2 final stitches don't want to go on to my needle. Yes, there, we've got them on to the needle. Right, so those ones are waiting to be knitted, and I'm going to pull the needle out of the other stitches. There's my yarn, and to come through and carry on knitting to the end of the round. And what I'm going to do is drop the final stitch, because we want the final stitch, we want an even number of stitches, not an odd number. So I've knitted the first 4 stitches on that needle, and I'm going to drop that 5th stitch. Now there'll be some looseness now from that 5th stitch. That's the looseness from the cast on there. That's going to come out. But this stitch on the needle, that looseness here, I'm going to carry on knitting in the round and show you. Now, this time I am going to start pulling that looseness through to tighten things up there. So here we want to start pulling the looseness through, and it won't take long for that to resolve itself. I'll just knit to the end of this needle and show you what the cast on does. Of course, ordinarily you'd be doing some increasing here. Right, I'm going to get that needle out of the way. Can you see this? This, if I pull on the tail, it tightens this hole up, and it'll end up reasonably neat. And that's it, everybody. Loop cast on method.